Good morning, St. Gerald. Ooh, that's a good response. Good job. Are you as happy as I am to see Father Mark back? Are you as nervous as I am preaching with Father Mark right here? In our first reading today, we see Jeremiah's faithfulness to his God-given mission and what faithfulness cost him. In our second reading, Paul urges the Romans not to live like the people around them. In the gospel, we see the faithfulness of Jesus and the kind of faithfulness that is demanded of those who would follow him. Got it? Got it? Good. Now let's open it up. Do you recall last Sunday's gospel when Peter was congratulated and praised by Jesus as he proudly and confidently announced the revelation of Jesus as Messiah and Son of God? Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my heavenly Father. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. Remember those powerful words Christ spoke? In today's gospel, it seems the rock gets hammered as Jesus blasts Peter, stating, "Get behind me, Satan, you are an obstacle to me." I think the gates of the netherworld just tried to creak open. How fun. One minute, Peter is being hailed by Jesus, and the next, crushed. Why? Because Peter flatly and outspokenly rejected the revelation of the suffering Messiah. In this, he represents the typical Christian. Please don't miss this. He's talking about you and I, caught between faith and doubt, some for whom the cross is a stumbling block. When God delivered the 10 Commandments to Moses, he didn't tell him, here's 10 suggestions, or here's 10 considerations. He called them what? Commandments. That means do this. Many of us look at the 10 Commandments in the narrowest sense possible. We read them and quickly check a box in our head, yes or no. Let's see. I haven't killed anybody. I didn't do anything horrible to my parents. I haven't robbed a bank or anything. I guess everything must be good between me and God. I'm good. What makes you so sure? What are the measurements you use to define your relationship with Christ? I submit most of us would determine the answer by using a highly subjective method of measurement. We look at the commitment level of others around us, and we feel like our relationship with Jesus is rock solid. Essentially, we grade our relationship with Jesus on the curve. As long as we are more spiritual than the next guy, we determine everything is fine. Have you ever noticed that when we compare ourselves to others as a way to measure our relationship with Christ, we almost always put ourselves up against someone who's spiritually anemic? We show up for Mass on Sunday, fully willing to offer an hour to the Lord. But if the service runs a little longer, we want extra credit. True? If you come into Mass on Sunday and you see that there's going to be a baptism, you go, oh. True? If you find yourself measuring your relationship with Jesus by comparing yourself to others, that is likely a self-indictment. Stop doing that. Jesus said to his disciples, unless you take up your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. The word cross, it seems, has been softened over time so that the saying of Jesus has lost its true meaning. The cross doesn't mean your arthritis, your indigestion, or that difficult relationship. the terrible boss, at least not in the first place. Those are the things which come to us in spite of ourselves. The cross in the New Testament, the cross Jesus speaks of means that suffering which comes into our lives because of the choices we have made for the kingdom. We choose the kingdom. In that, brothers and sisters, it is always something we choose. Think about this. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. Before that, he was on the run for a couple of years. Of that time that he was on the run, he wrote, "It wasn't easy to separate myself from my wife and children, to say goodbye to the good old days when, at the end of a strenuous day at the office, I could look forward to joining my family at the dinner table, and instead to take up the life of a man hunted continuously by the police, living separated from those who are closest to me, facing continually the hazard of detection and arrest. This was a life infinitely more difficult than serving a prison sentence." What drove Mandela to make such great sacrifices was his love for his country. This was the cross he carried because of his love for his people. It has been claimed that religion asks too little of people. It is too ready to offer comfort and to console, but it has lost its courage to challenge. The result is that for many, religion is just a crutch, something to lean on in times of weakness and infirmity. But in times of wealth and health and happiness, we more or less forget it. It is absolutely true that faith is the best support we can have in times of weakness, but it is a lot more. It should be. No, it must be a positive force in our lives. It is a crutch in difficult times, times of sadness and weakness, but it must be a pair of wings in times of joy and strength. It must appeal to our weaknesses and our strength. In our gospel today, Jesus asks for a commitment from his followers. If anyone wishes to be a follower of mine, he must renounce himself and take up his cross and follow me. For the committed Christian, suffering is not a likelihood. It's a certainty. Yet, this doesn't mean that suffering is something Christians should seek. Jesus did not seek suffering, and Gethsemane makes that clear. But our following of Christ can be in small steps. God is patient. His challenge is invitation. What does following Christ mean in practice? It means faithfulness to one's way of life, concern for others in whatever manner, the caring gesture, the kind word. Brothers and sisters, these add up. The Lord does not overlook the painful decision, the unspoken sorrow, the secret suffering. Saints are simply sinners who kept trying. Saints are simply sinners who kept trying. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not fail you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Deuteronomy 31. Often, for many of us, trying to live out our faithfulness can elicit feelings of fear or anxiety. Much of the time, our anxiety stems from a fear of something or someone in the future. If I do this, what will people think? What will they say? If I take this position, what will my reputation look like? The next time this happens to you, Try the 3 P's remedy. Write this down. There's going to be a test later. First P, prepare. Do what you can now. Simply ponder, what can I do in a proactive way that makes sense? For example, you know someone that you would like to invite to Alpha, but are terrified they will rebuff your invitation. You've attended, you know what an impact it has had on your journey, but you never shared that with anyone. Why not? Fear. They think you will turn into a Jesus freak. Trust and ask. What's the worst that can happen? They'll say no. Okay. Someone else is waiting to be invited. Keep moving. Satan loves Christian complacency, and he instills fear. Simply address that fear like Jesus did when he blasted Peter. Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me. Prepare. Present. Live in the present moment, not in the imagined frightening future. Living in the now can help smother the fire of fear. Have you been invited to a CEC weekend but avoided attending because you think it's going to be terrible and you're going to be surrounded by a bunch of holy men and women dancing around you singing Kumbaya? That's a false narrative led by the evil one himself. You'll be surrounded, all right, surrounded by a committed group of fellow disciples who want to love you, feed you, laugh with you, and invite you to meet Jesus in a way you perhaps never have. Take the plunge, accept the invitation, and be moved. Replace your fear with joyful anticipation. Satan hates that. Prepare, ponder, pray. Know that God is in control of the future. God has the power and the love to do what we cannot do. Our Father's love can and does shape the future. Pray and experience the peace that will replace the anxiety, because God, who loves you unconditionally, is in control now and in the days ahead. We need to get out of these seats and take his love into the streets of our lives. May God guide and strengthen us to accept his call to discipleship and to pray when the seeds of fear and doubt sown by Satan himself creep up. Get behind me, Satan. You're an obstacle to me.